I'm Ratika Rose. Welcome to Awaken Your Truth, where I bring conscious dialogues and stories that will help you free your mind, heal your life, and embody your power. I hope to shift your perspective and create deeper understanding of yourself and others. Everyone has a story, everyone has a purpose, every experience has a reason. This show is about engaging with the truth of who you are, discovering your personal power and stepping into your authentic self, so you can have more compassion and empathy for yourself and everyone around you. It's time for us to dig deep and learn to see ourselves and others with clarity so that we can come together and create a brighter future for humanity. When we free our minds, we can heal our lives, and this is how we build a powerful, transformed world. Awaken Your Truth starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Awaken Your Truth with me, Ratika Rose, and today with my special co-host, spiritual sister, Azure Darby. Welcome her, everybody, and I hope that when you tune in every second and fourth Thursday of the month, that you are gaining new perspective on topics, causes, and communities that are often misunderstood, overlooked, or sometimes judged upon. I hope that the conversations I have here are conscious dialogues for your mind, heal your life, and embody your power, and help to shift a perspective around any areas that may have been a challenge in thought process up until this point of listening to the show. So today is December 23rd, and we are moving into the Christmas holiday weekend. And when Azure and I were talking, she brought up the topic of Christ consciousness, which is something that's very personal and dear to both of us. We have been through a lot of our journey together in this life, into our spiritual paths and enlightenment. And I said, what a perfect show to have with Azure on December 23rd as we're moving into this weekend. And you know what, both of us are going to be sharing our experiences with Christ consciousness and what that means to each of us. But I do want to share that the Christ consciousness is not affiliated with Christianity. Christ consciousness is a term, and Azure, since you're co-hosting me, you may jump in at any time, but Christ consciousness, is really the embodiment of unconditional love and compassion that one achieves after going through a really deep phase of spiritual learning and spiritual lessons, and really a time of suffering and testing that have led those of us that have come into the spiritual enlightenment to really view ourselves and others in the world in a different way. And that really comes from deeper unconditional love, compassion, empathy for ourselves, for others in the world around us. And that's really what I feel like Christ consciousness embodies a lot of, and what we want to talk about here today. There's so much description on Christ consciousness that I can talk about, but I think since it is the Christmas weekend, I will just say, while this is not going to be a religious discussion, but I think it is important to share that Jesus was given the term Jesus Christ literally actually meaning an achievement of a higher state of mind, and an achievement of a spiritual status, which is what Jesus as a human form here went through to achieve the Christ consciousness that he attained. And so that being said, during this holiday season time, and what Azure and I will share with you today is that this Christ consciousness and can be achieved by any of us, really,
Absolutely.
Right? As we're all going through our different spiritual processes and paths to get us to where we need to be to achieve that higher state of being within ourselves.
Right. And that's ultimately, absolutely, that's ultimately the essence of it. When we're talking about Christ consciousness, we're really talking about achieving a higher state of being, a higher state of consciousness. For many of us, that may be sort of a part of our sort of spiritual journey or our goal here, as spiritual beings having, a human experience on the planet. So again, not related to, or at least not for us, related to or connected to religion per se, but really connected to our goal or our journey as becoming the best selves that we could be while we're here on the planet, the highest versions of ourselves.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I'd like to share another description if that's okay.
Absolutely.
The most common understanding of Christ consciousness is a state of consciousness in which a person has found self-realization and unity with God or the divine. And I forgot to mention at the top of the show, the episode being Christ consciousness becoming at one with the divine in you, right? So this Christ consciousness is really the unity with God or the divine, but the unity of God and the divine within you, recognizing, right? Recognizing within ourselves that God is in us, that God has always been in us.
Right. Not sort of a separate sort of entity or being, but dwelling within us, and that we are one with source, spirit, whatever, word you use to speak to that connection, that we're one with that connection. And we're also one with everyone else. So we're one with all that there is. And that really is an important sort of aspect to this one spiritual journey, or one's journey towards, again, that higher state of consciousness, is that realization and understanding that God, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, the universe dwells within us. So we're always connected, regardless of your religious or spiritual affiliation.
I love that. And I think that for me, when I was going through my journey and I really came into, my spiritual self, thank you for sharing that. It's like, I remember like really profoundly one day, just in meditation and prayer, when God was speaking to me, and when he said, I created you. And I talk about this in my book too. So the audience that has listened to some of my previous shows, I share this in the introduction of my book too. When God really spoke to me and said, I created you out of love, right? I am in you, you are with me. There is no separation. That's that oneness.
Right.
Azure was just
that
talking
part.
about. Yeah. There's a oneness. Yes, we were, sort of given birth from our mothers, and we were created by our parents, but we were created through God, right? And so that presence is always with us. And once we come to that realization and we start operating the world with that, that's where our sort of Christ consciousness starts to evolve. And
absolutely. I think it really helps us to see how divine we are, right? So I think because sometimes there can be a separation that's created between, spirit and ourselves, and we may see ourselves more as sort of a lower version, but this really is like sort of, again, seeing our God self, seeing that connection and seeing our divinity through that connection that we have with spirit or source. And I think it's really important.
So important. And when that separation occurs, that separation then is what creates all the sort of challenging mindset that we can have, like depression and anxiety, anger, frustration, worthiness, etc. Right? Part of the description of Christ consciousness too, and seeing that, and once we move into that, is our truth, right? That's why awaken your truth. I love this, right? So part of Christ consciousness is also viewed as having found truth. Truth within ourselves, truth of the world, truth of really what God consciousness is here within us and around us, right? And the rediscovery of one's connection with their innermost spiritual being.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Right. And what you spoke to just a moment ago about that separation and how that can lead to, some of those sort of negative emotions and experiences and things of that nature. When we're talking about Christ consciousness, again, referring to or thinking about the highest version of ourselves, think about sort of at the opposite of that, thinking about duality, it's sort of our egoic self, right? And if we know about our ego or our egoic self, there's a lot of fear that resides within that part of our being, which can lead to those negative thoughts, feelings, behaviors, etc. And so again, coming back to this idea of Christ consciousness is really an opportunity for us to, again, with remembering that connection and our divinity, to operate in a way that embodies that or reflects that, and hopefully will help us to combat some of the egoic things that come up for us as human beings, because as human beings, that's going to come up, but we have to have something that we're rooted in that helps us to move through those challenges and some of the things that the ego brings up for us. The ego isn't our enemy, but it can create a lot of challenge for us if we reside within that space more so than we do that higher version of ourselves.
Right.
That's really what the Christ, so that's really what it's about.
And that higher version of ourselves is that truth. And is that unconditional love, is that compassion and empathy that comes through that sort of enlightened phase of being.
Exactly. Right. And when we're talking about truth, right, the universal truth at its essence, at its core, is that we are one with God, we're one with source, we're one with each other, we're one with that energy. That really is all that it is. And then the knowing of that truth and the embodying of that truth can really help us operate in ways that I think are just benefits not only to us, but just, just the collective as a whole.
Absolutely. And part of moving into the Christ consciousness too is just it's a shift in our being. It's a shift into emotional maturity and intellectual development, that feeling of bliss and joy through all things, even when fear and ego is with us.
Right. Exactly.
We like now have these tools, right, that can help get us through. We're going to commercial break here in a second, but I think it'll be important when we come back. And I am going to apologize. I forgot to introduce Azure properly, and I will do that after the break.
She knows me.
But and her background too. And how she uses Christ consciousness actually in part of the work that she does. So, I think it'll be important to talk about if we come back from the break is, that period, those periods of fear and ego are constantly going to be coming into our lives and testing us, right? But once we've reached that, once we've have those spiritual tools under our belt, right, we can recognize that, it's creeping in again, because life is always going to test us. God is always going to test us, right? But it's only pushing us to be that better version of ourselves, right? Because we're constantly growing on this journey, right? Would you agree?
Exactly. Absolutely.
We're constantly growing on this journey. So we're always sort of going to be tested and be challenged. And I giggle because, this it's like, it's literally how many times has it happened to us in our lifetime? Where we're like, here we go again.
Yep, here we go again.
Thing. How do I get through this? Okay, but I got this, I'll figure it out. And then it just pushes us to the next phase. So maybe when we come back from the commercial, Azure, if you're okay, if we talk a little bit about the testing period,
Yeah, let's do that.
Someone like the test that we've maybe sort of been through that has pushed you and I in our lifetimes, in our careers, in our personal lives to another level,
Right.
But if it
plenty to talk about there.
You say that?
I said plenty to talk about there.
Right? So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll be right back after the commercial break.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow an awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
I have a special holiday healing service for everybody to go into your holiday weekends for anyone that's looking to ground themselves in conscious energy. This will be a time of reflection and coaching with me for any challenges that you feel like you may be facing during this holiday season. This will be also a time of guided meditation that I have been conducting over the last 7 years. Which will really help you connect to your higher self and your conscious self. So if you're feeling like you're needing any support during this holiday season, on December 24th at 11 a.m. or December 31st at 11 a.m., both Pacific Standard Time, please click the link or visit ratikarose.com for all the information, and you can sign up for the holiday healing service there. Welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, Ratika Rose, and my special guest, Azure Darby. And I apologize, at the top of the show, I forgot to introduce her properly, but this is my spiritual sister, Azure Darby. She has been practicing social work in the field of social work for 20 years. She teaches at USC for the students of the Masters of Social Work program there over the last 9 years. She's a Reiki master, spiritual teacher. She's also a student of Tantra, where she believes that pleasure and conscious sexuality helps bring you closer to source and your ascension. So I apologize for not introducing you at the top of the show, but everybody here's Azure Darby.
Thank you, sis.
You're welcome. So, we just finished talking about, one's path into Christ consciousness and sort of reaching that ascension to your higher self and, your deeper sense of spiritual self. But in order to get there, there's always sort of a testing and sort of internal conflict suffering phase that we go through, right? For those of us that have come into our purpose and calling to become a spiritual teacher, or have now come into a place of considering ourselves, a spiritual master. We're learning every single day that that doesn't change, right? But it is sort of the testing and suffering phase. And those of us that sort of have come into this path of now wanting to teach spirituality on a conscious level, we've gone through some deep things, right? We've gone through some deep things to get here. And and that's why we're here. And I mean, like, and this is not about religion, but since we are talking about Christ consciousness and, and moving into Christmas weekend. And the other thing we do want to share is that, which is fascinating, right? Because the Christmas holiday is celebrated by so many people worldwide.
Right.
And a lot and majority of the people that celebrate Christmas are not Christians. But they embody the spirit of Christmas, which I feel like is that unconditional love and compassion for one another, which is really the embodiment of Christ consciousness, right?
Exactly.
Which it's wonderful that we're having this conversation on the 23rd of December as we're moving into the holiday season. So as people are listening to the show, they can start looking at how they're celebrating Christmas and what the spirit of Christmas actually sort of is. It really sort of is this Christ consciousness energy.
Yeah,
right?
I love that. Right, I love that. Because there can be sort of judgment around celebrating Christmas and not celebrating Christmas, right? For a myriad of reasons, or sometimes it may feel exclusive to a certain idea. But when we sort of embody or sort of bring it back to sort of this pure essence of Christ consciousness, it really means that anybody can celebrate and enjoy Christmas, in sort of the pure sense of it being, like you said, about love and compassion and connecting with family and things of that nature, which connect right back to this idea of being Christ-like or utilizing Christ consciousness. So it definitely fits in that way, or it is befitting in that way.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember those that don't have people to celebrate this holiday with.
Absolutely.
Right? And
absolutely.
How can we start embodying, and we'll talk more about this later into the show too, but even now, like, how can all of us, as we're listening to this now and understanding Christ consciousness better and what it really means, how can we all sort of embody that into our lives to bring those out to the people that we know are suffering right now, right?
Yeah, well, if we go back, we were going to talk a little bit about the suffering piece, or I don't know, I don't sort of want to use that word, but sort of the testing or challenging that comes with our spiritual evolution, right? Some people may describe that, or the beginning of that, as a dark night of the soul experience. For us spiritual beings, most of us know what the dark night of the soul means or what it entails, but it very much is that, right? You just feel tested. You just may feel as if a lot of things are going wrong. A lot of things are falling away. Life as you know it is just not the same. And you're needing something. You're needing a connection or an understanding that helps you to work through some of those challenges that you're experiencing. I remember my first conscious experience of having a dark night of the soul was like probably 10 plus years into doing doing social work. And, if anybody who is a social worker or who knows a social worker, that's really tough work. I mean, it's gut wrenching, it's challenging, it's heartbreaking, and also rewarding, but it's a really difficult, I see it as God's work. I see it as a calling. Yeah, I don't think anybody would choose to be a social worker unless you felt called to do it. So if we're talking about, being Christ-like or embodying Christ consciousness, I already feel like that field is very much connected to that, whether you're spiritual or not. But the hard challenges that came with doing that work also left me feeling sort of spiritually or just emotionally empty for a really long time. And I did experience a depression and anxiety and lots of different things. And it was actually my spiritual quest. It was sort of feeling like, okay, I need to connect with something higher, great, or I wouldn't say greater, but just something higher than me. And that's when I started my spiritual journey right along that time. And so it's not to say that those trials and challenges didn't come, but I had a better understanding of them. And I then learned tools to utilize to help me to sort of work through some of those challenges. And it changed everything for me. I'm telling you, once I started that path, and started learning those lessons and those tools and connecting with other people like you, who also understood that and who were on a similar journey, it changed everything. And I'm incredibly thankful for it. I could not be, sort of moving through life right now because life is challenging right now for many of us, dealing with the pandemic and so many other things, if I didn't have that foundation, if I didn't have that connection. So it's paying off by leaps and bounds, having focused on that and moved through this journey the way that I have, because it's armored me in a way to be able to deal with some of the challenges that are coming up in the here and now.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that for me too, you know, like I've talked about on the show many times before, sort of my journey, like the three main things were happening at the same time at the top of 2011 with like my most challenging director role that I had. I was then, you know, I was in the middle of, you know, dissolving a business partnership that went wrong in a movie deal that I was part of. That was an abusive relationship. And then I was also healing from a personal relationship, and all three of these things were happening at the same time. And that was my trial period. That was my test period, right? But the blessings in disguise that came from that, right? So I broke down. Right? Broke down. But when I came through, and then I started meeting people like you, and we started doing the work, you know, with our spiritual teachers and masters, and sort of incorporating all of those tools into our lives, it shifted the way I thought, right? Like you can attest to this too. I'm sure it's like, okay, so I was so broken and felt so beaten down during that trial phase of my life, but also not realizing that actually wasn't for me, right? So it was because of the spiritual work we were doing, I was starting to realize that, oh, God was walking with me the whole time, like that footprints poem, right? There's one path of footsteps because God was carrying me. Those three things weren't meant for me at that time, right? It's not like it was bad. I had to go through it. They were great opportunities in my life, but they weren't meant for me. And if they had continued on, then something along those lines would have fallen apart anyway, right? So it was just being taken away. God was literally taking it away so that suffering could end, right? Or so something worse wouldn't happen.
I love what you just said. I think that's an important thing to stick to when we talk about pain or suffering, right? It's not happening for the sake of it to be happening, right? It's not happening just for the heck of it. It's information, right? It's alerting us to something. It's alerting us to something that needs to change, something that we need to let go of, something we need to shift, an action we need to take, etc. Right? It's a message. It's a message of information from spirit, from our higher selves, to let us know, okay, we need to move differently. We may need to let some people go, or we may need to, you know, forge a different path, right? That literally is an information system for us, right?
And that's exactly what was happening for me, is that God was pushing me to a different path. He was pushing me to the healing path, right?
Same.
Right? So like, it's interesting, right? Because we both come from a field of like medicine, you know, occupational therapy, service, social work, etc. You know,
that has a lot of bureaucracy
people in such deep ways,
you know,
and then pushing us to deeper healing modalities like Reiki. Both of us have studied Reiki, and then just all of our spiritual learnings. And so for us to be able to take that into the work that we do, and so I know that when you teach your students, you also teach compassion.
Absolutely. I operate from a very humanistic perspective or place when I'm teaching my students. You know, I let them know that, you know, I'm a human being moving through life just as they are. And I invite them to have compassion for themselves and for others. I mean, as social workers, we're taught to have compassion for others, but sometimes that compassion falls short when it comes to ourselves. And it could also be easy to judge because we are working with people who are dealing with a lot of challenges. So the compassion piece, I think, is incredibly important for us and for others, again, because we are dealing with some really tough things. Being a human being is not an easy thing. And there are lots of difficult things that come up as a result of that can cause us to judge ourselves and to judge others, and to just to look at life in a very negative way. And I think having self-compassion and compassion for others is a great sort of antidote to that. I think it really can, you know, I think that is an important aspect of embodying the Christ consciousness, is that compassion piece.
And I think, and I love too, at the top of the show when you said, you know, this is what we learn when we go through our spiritual teachings, is that we are human beings having a spiritual, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Exactly.
And that is so important to remember. Because in our core, the energy of who we are is a spiritual being. We've just been placed down here via our contract to say, this is the assignment you have down on earth right now. This is what you're meant to do. Right. And then we're gonna but we learn that, right, when we're going through the process. And so this is why all the things in our human experience are happening to us. But when we're in our human mind, we're not realizing that, right? When we step back into our spiritual mind and say, okay, this is an experience we're happening. So what are they wanting me to do next? Why is this happening? So I can take it to the next level.
Right. What is this teaching me? Right. Or what is this showing me that I can then show to others? Right. Because it's also, as being spiritual teachers, we're learning these lessons so that we can then teach them. Totally. And help others along their spiritual journeys. It's like trial by fire, right? We have to go through it in order to be able to 100%. Speak to it.
Yes. Yep. And so we do need to go to break, but when we come back from break, I think then it's really going to be important to talk to the audience about then how all the teachings we have learned through our spiritualists and how we've been now operating differently in the world with those teachings. Right.
Let's do that. Yep.
So cool. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Azure. Thank you, audience. We'll be back in a minute.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow an awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book. Or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
I have a special holiday healing service for everybody to go into your holiday weekends for anyone that's looking to ground themselves in conscious energy. This will be a time of reflection and coaching with me for any challenges that you feel like you may be facing during this holiday season. This will be also a time of guided meditation that I have been conducting over the last 7 years. Which will really help you connect to your higher self and your conscious self. So if you're feeling like you're needing any support during this holiday season, on December 24th at 11 a.m. or December 31st at 11 a.m., both Pacific Standard Time, please click the link or visit ratikarose.com for all the information, and you can sign up for the holiday healing service there. Welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, Ratika Rose, and my special guest, spiritual sister, Azure Darby. And we're now going to talk about how we have operated, how we started to operate differently in the world once, we started to ascend spiritually and bring in and take in all the tools that we learned during our testing phase and growth phase spiritually, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, just to start that conversation, I was sort of asking myself that before we started, and I know one of the big things for me when it comes to that is just really just my way of thinking. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, Christ consciousness really is sort of this higher version of ourselves. It's our most God self, right, or God-like self, and then we have our ego. And as humans, people cling very tightly to their ego. So I think as I am sort of moving through the world, I'm sort of asking myself, okay, am I operating from my ego, or am I operating from my God self, or my higher self, or from the Christ, from Christ consciousness? And not to judge myself in those moments where I'm operating from my ego self, but just to note that, okay, operating from that place is usually going to mean that I'm going to make choices that are not necessarily the best for me.
Can I say something real quick to ego?
Go for it.
Because I think it's important. I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but I think, because as you're speaking, this is coming to me, so I want to say it, because I think a lot of times people don't understand the full extent of ego, right? We did mention earlier in the show that ego equals fear, but what does that mean? A lot of times people know ego as like a bloated, a self-esteem or like a narcissism or what have you. And yes, those aspects are there, but all of that comes from the one core area of fear, right? Ego equals fear. And so when we're fearful of anything, right, then those different behavior patterns or those different ways of being are going to show itself up.
Right. And one way that we can sort of simplify that is if you think about it with ego, sort of ego causes us to contract. Right? We kind of fold into ourselves. It's a protection. It's a survival. Whereas when we are operating from love, which is like the Christ consciousness, what we're talking about is love energy, right? At its core, it's love. that's more expansive, and you're open, you're more free in the decisions that you're making and the ways in which you're moving through the world. So that's even a great thing to be able to ask yourself when you're making decisions or you're taking certain actions. It's like, okay, is this coming from a place of fear, or is it coming from a place of love? That will tell you whether or not you're in your ego, or if you're more so operating from from Christ consciousness or your higher self.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think too, like when we're talking to people, I don't know why this sort of hit my soul for a minute when you were talking, was like also taking accountability, right? For ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? Because like,
Absolutely.
so exactly what you're saying and what we've been talking about. Okay, so when we're operating in fear and ego, there are times that sometimes we're outside of ourselves, right? Like we don't even know, because we're actually really not connected to our spiritual self. So in a sense, we actually are outside of ourselves because we're not operating in our true nature. Our true nature is that is our true essence, is our true nature, right? And so sometimes when we're not operating from our best and highest selves and our true nature, we can sometimes do things that are not the best for other people, right? We can be hurtful. People can hurt us, etc. And so I don't know why this just hit my core when you were saying that, but I think it's all the accountability piece is important, right? Because then we remember, say someone comes to us with a conversation, say, this hurt my feelings, or this came out, this is my experience of our conversation or our interaction that day, or what have you. So when you respond back to someone, or you take a look at it and you self-reflect, are you going to self-reflect or respond back in love or in fear?
Exactly.
So if you respond back in love, the nature of the conversation and how you see yourself, your true self, is going to be different versus operating in fear and ego, saying, oh, I didn't XYZ, and like play victim to your own self. You know what I mean?
You're absolutely right. And that makes me think of, and I don't know if it's okay to say her name, but there's a spiritual teacher that I follow. And one of the ways in which she describes love is taking another into yourself as yourself, right? That there's a oneness with anyone that you love. There's a oneness between you and that person, which means that to hurt them is to hurt you. If you truly love that person, to hurt them will be hurtful to you. And that's ultimately what Christ consciousness speaks to, right? Or even operating from a place of love means that we understand that there's a oneness, that we're all connected. Not only are we connected to source, to spirit, but we're connected to one another. So any action that I take towards you that is harmful, I am in turn harming myself, which if we're operating from that space, it should be much more difficult to do those kinds of things or to take those kinds of actions than if we're operating in our ego, right?
I know I'm giggling right now because it's literally like that cliche phrase, like, it's not you, it's me. Well, yeah, kind of it is, right? Know, it is, because I'm doing something here. I have to sort myself. You know what I mean? And so, and one of the main bullet points, I'm looking down at my notes, like what we talked about was what we do to others, we do to ourselves, right? So exactly what you're saying about love, right? So there's so much truth in that, right? Because how you're treating someone else is really a reflection of or how I treat you is a reflection of how I'm treating myself. How you treat me is a reflection of how you're treating. Yeah, exactly. How you're feeling about yourself, how you're treating the people around you in the outside world.
Right. And I think it's important to note, because I think we're talking, or I know I spoke, the example that I gave was sort of more from a harmful place, but also that means that doing loving things, doing compassionate things, being kind to one another, being, empathetic, all of those things, when we, convey that to others, that's also, giving it to ourselves as well. So it goes both ways. Those loving, kind, those higher self things that we do are also beneficial to us. That's why giving feels so good, to most of us, because we receive as we give.
Totally. And then which brings me to the point I wanted to sort of bring us back into, like, how we started operating differently in the world once we started to ascend is, and I know for me, and I know that when we talked about this earlier, for me, right, how I feel like the major shifts that started shifting with me through my ascension process was really finding gratitude in everything. Right.
So important.
And the importance of serving others. So like I always talk about this too, right? It's whenever you're feeling down or, challenged in some way, the best thing you can do is go out and serve somebody else. Because you're immediately going to feel gratified. Right.
Yeah. And it takes you out of yourself.
It takes you out of yourself. Right. And I think just for me in general, gratitude is really important because through my process, through my spiritual process, I really learned that everything really is for me and everything really is a lesson. And so regardless of how it makes me feel and how I may react in that moment or not, or whatever, I want to take accountability for myself. I know, be highly aware, because that's the other thing through the spiritual ascension is you become highly aware of how you're showing up, right? Even if in the moment it's not the best, when you go back and look, you're like, oh, you're aware of what you did and you can go correct it immediately, right? And so because of that, I'm thankful to everything, right? So everything is gratitude. Everything I sign off on, my emails or whatever, show everything is gratitude, peace and blessings, right? And I know for you, a big thing, a big area through your spiritual ascension, or at least what we talked about, was compassion.
Right. And I spoke about that a little bit earlier, but it really is an important piece to me, again, because it's just recognizing, like we talked about, that this ascension journey, this journey just as a spiritual being here on the planet, can be damn hard and it can be really challenging. Right. And it's just like just having compassion for the missteps, the mistakes, those moments when we are in our ego, those moments when we're not able to sort of operate from our higher or best selves. Like you said, being able to come back and understand that and to try to operate differently. I think really, it's important to embody compassion, because it can be easy to take on shame or guilt or fear, like we talked about. And it's just really just understanding that, we're all going through things. There's no human being that's exempt from challenges, from trials, from difficulties, regardless of your, all the identities that we may hold. Everybody's going through things. And so I think I see compassion as a major antidote, as a major sort of form of medicine, if you will. That we can offer ourselves and others as we sort of walk together through this, this journey, that we're moving through, as human beings on the planet.
Yeah. And, that being said, I do want to let the audience know too, that I'm holding a special holiday healing service on Christmas Eve at 11 o'clock. So December 24th at 11 o'clock, and also New Year's Eve, December 31st at 11 o'clock. In hopes, if anyone is feeling this way or is needing to feel more connected to themselves or to just vibrate at a higher conscious level, please do come into the healing service. It's a blend of my coaching and my guided meditation that I've been doing over the last 7 years. So I do want to offer it here to the audience. So if anyone is feeling in any kind of way where they feel like they just need some healing, they want to get some more support around any of the areas that that are not serving them right now, and really just go through meditation and connect with your higher self, because that's really what my guided meditation supports my clients to do. Please look at the link during the commercial break and sign up there. Again, it's really to help you sort of start the holidays off right or in a more peaceful way. I want to be here for you during the holidays if you're feeling lonely, or you feel like you need some more support around any area. So again, December 24th, 11 a.m. and December 31st at 11 a.m. just before the holidays and the new year start. Something you can do for yourself in the morning. So before the holiday weekend begins. So I look forward to any of those of you that would like to join the holiday healing service with me and receive some guidance and support and meditation. And when we come back from the break, let's talk about this holiday season and how we can really embody Christ consciousness. All of us, Azure and I will talk about how we feel like, and tips to give you guys, how we can really embody Christ consciousness into the holiday season for ourselves, for our families, for our friends, for others, strangers, and so what if some of those qualities of Christ consciousness that we sort of want to really review with you and help everybody adopt during this holiday season, so everybody can feel loved and supported and with empathy and compassion. So thank you for listening, and we'll be right back.
If we could help you transcend your post-traumatic stress experience without drugs, grow an awareness of why you're suffering the experience, and offer you a solid, no-strings-attached money-back guarantee, would you be interested? Get a free copy of The Power That Heals, Sampling the Wisdom by Concept Theory founder Dr. Thurman Fleet. Visit concept-theory.org/free book. Or call toll-free 1-800-531-5628. It's time to live again, isn't it? You do have a choice.
I have a special holiday healing service for everybody to go into your holiday weekends for anyone that's looking to ground themselves in conscious energy. This will be a time of reflection and coaching with me for any challenges that you feel like you may be facing during this holiday season. This will be also a time of guided meditation that I have been conducting over the last 7 years. which will really help you connect to your higher self and your conscious self. So if you're feeling like you're needing any support during this holiday season, on December 24th at 11 a.m. or December 31st at 11 a.m., both Pacific Standard Time, please click the link or visit retikarose.com for all the information, and you can sign up for the holiday healing service there. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to Awaken Your Truth with me, Retika Rose, and my special co-host guest, Ajor Darby. And during this last segment of the show, we just want to tap into a little bit more on Christ consciousness, review some of the qualities of being Christ-like, and also just remember that, and I love how Ajor said this over the commercials, you know, it's Christmas is typically a time of joy and togetherness and bliss, but there are so many people that are not feeling that way during the holiday. The holiday times can also be very you know, challenging for a lot of people as well. And so we do want to honor and recognize that, and remember, you know, that what we can do, what can we incorporate, what Christ consciousness like qualities can we incorporate into this holiday season for others. And please do remember too, the holiday healing services are there for you to attend Christmas Eve, December 24th at 11 a.m. and New Year's Eve, December 31st at 11 a.m. The link is in the bio of the show and also during the commercials. So, you know, what does being Christ-like mean? Some of the qualities that I think of Christ-like are when Jesus was going through his time, right? Here, and why he was given that title of being Christ-like and having Christ consciousness, right, is because he attained that level. But what was that, right? There was no judgment of others. There was no hurting of others. There was full acceptance of others, no matter your status, right? There was no competition for others. So no judgment, no hurting, no competition, and accepting of others. But I think another really important thing is it's not just all of those qualities to others. It's the no judgment, no harming, no competition of yourself either, right? So it's remembering to not judge yourself, not hurt yourself.
It starts with us.
Yes, it starts with us. Not don't compete with yourself. Like, don't compete with anybody else. It's just about you, and accepting yourself fully for who you are, regardless of what you're moving through. This is your journey, right? It's your journey of consciousness, right? So when you can find that unconditional love and that unconditional compassion for yourself, right? As you're moving through your journey and as you're moving through this higher consciousness, you'll also start seeing the world in that way too. So when we talk about how we can embodying this power of Christ consciousness into our lives, first, everything always starts with us. Right. And then how can we take that out to others? Yeah.
It does. And I think, you know, again, because we're operating from a place of spirituality, you know, we are not necessarily religious people, but the energy, you know, of Christ consciousness and being Christ-like, I think is one that you and I both, you know, is important to us, and the way in which we seek to live our lives. And I agree with you, all of those qualities, and I see it as being unconditional love. And as we were just talking about, compassion, kindness, right? It's service, right? It's being of service and in service to others. It's also faith, right? It's having, you know, having faith and understanding that the experiences that we're having, like we talked about, they're teaching us a lesson or helping us to navigate this journey and get to where it is that we need to be. I think, you know, at its core, you know, or when we're thinking just about, you know, even if you're not Christian and you know, this is not your thing, if you are celebrating Christmas, that it does come back to love, right? Love for family, love for, you know, other people in our lives, and, you know, and just love for life even, right? That are parts of embodying Christ consciousness or being Christ-like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, thank you. I like how you brought up faith. And it's just like a universal faith, right? Knowing
universal.
It's a spiritual faith, right? That Ajor and I are talking about, you know, and that many of us that consider ourselves spiritual but not religious, you know, operate under, right? It's that faith of just knowing that power, that, you know, the higher power is there. You know, I do want to say also, this is, you know, we talked about this a little bit too. It's, and I actually, I'm going to go back to my notes real quick, right? It's that, it's that achievement of the spiritual status, right? So that spiritual status, yes, we're moving into the holiday of Christmas and we're talking about Christ consciousness, and we've mentioned Jesus, right? But there's also other spiritual masters right?
Yeah.
That have
We can
reached
talk
this
about that.
quality, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Buddha,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Mother Mary, Kuan Yin, you know, all these other spiritual and ascendant masters, which I know was important for you. I think you did want to touch on that on the show too.
Yeah.
That also reached that level of spiritual status, which is all Christ consciousness. Again, Christ is just the term Christ literally just means that attainment.
Yeah. And I right. And at its sort of, yes. And at its simplest, I connected to it being an energy, right? And I think that that's easier because that energy of Christ shows up in different ways for different people, under different names, under different understandings, etc. Right? It's Horus, you know, in Egyptian religion, right, or spirituality, right? So it's not so much about the name as it is the energy. And you know, as you know, spiritual beings or you know, spiritual learners, you and I have learned a lot about different energies. This idea of human beings having walked the planet also on spiritual quests, right? Quests for ascension or enlightenment, and in so doing, they've gotten to a place where they are now on a higher realm, but their energy is still accessible to us to be able to connect with as guides to help us along our respective journeys. And Christ, Jesus, that energy is just one example of many, and I mean many different energies or deities or ascendant masters, right? That can support us along our spiritual journey.
Totally. And I want to read this. I think this is important. Christ consciousness is the state of awareness of our true nature, our higher self, and our birthright as the children of God. This is a man-centered philosophy that is behind most religions. So when we come back to what you were saying about faith, and so that's why I sort of brought up all the different spiritual masters, right? Because every religion has their own faith based on their spiritual master, whoever that spiritual master is to them, right? In the end, it's all spirituality. So for the audience, like we want to really want to talk that this is all spirituality, right? And how people choose to hear the word for their spiritual ascension, right? But so that faith is really important, right? That higher power, whatever that is for you. And even when I talk, you know, when I go through my assessment with my clients and I get to that phase of the crown chakra, right? Our connection to our higher source, what that is to you individually, because it's very individual for each person, right?
It is.
But
it's very personal.
It is that consciousness, that higher consciousness, that Christ consciousness, that Buddha consciousness, that Mother Mary consciousness, that whatever consciousness it is for you, right? It is that connection for you, and having that faith that power is supporting you along this path and along your journey to help you achieve your highest state.
Exactly. And our goal, I mean, I won't say everyone, but you know, as a spiritual being who that journey, that path is very important to us. That's what we're seeking. That's why we're here, is to achieve that state of consciousness for ourselves, right? So that's so they're sort of like the, you know, the beings who are sort of showing us the way. They're the way showers, to then help us to then become way showers for those of us who are sort of on the planet with us right now at the same time, right? They're the example of that energy. Those energies are the example of that for us.
Right. And if I didn't mention that at the top of the show, I just also do want to say Christ consciousness, so we have a couple minutes left here in the show, is available to all those who seek awareness and spiritual awakening, regardless of their personal religious adherence. So this is sort of the embodiment of what Christ consciousness is, what Azure and I wanted to talk about on the show today. So in our last minute here left in the show, Azure, what can we tell the audience or help the audience to, what qualities, so a couple of things, what are the Christ-like qualities that we can commit to incorporating into our life to support others? And then what are the Christ-like qualities that we can incorporate into our life to be at one with our divine self? So coming back to Christ consciousness, becoming at one with our divine self. What are those qualities?
And I think it goes back to the things we've already talked about. I love the concept of gratitude within this. I think gratitude is everything. It actually raises our vibration. I mean, when we're in gratitude, we're going to be more connected to source. When we're compassionate, we're embodying and expressing unconditional love. All of those things are going to help us to, you know, sort of operate from that higher space, which is what we essentially want to do. And, you know, operating during a time that can be really challenging, we need that. You need that higher source energy to be able to sort of navigate through some of the challenges that might come up during this holiday season.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also let's remember to not judge ourselves,
Right.
not harm ourselves, right? Be accepting of who you are and where you are, and then in turn look at that for other people as well, right? So when we adopt Christ consciousness into our lives, it's really about finding gratitude in all things that are happening in our world, good or bad. It's about having compassion for ourselves and for others. It's not about judging ourselves and judging others. Everyone's on their own path and where they're meant to be in this exact present moment. Let's try and remember to accept ourselves so then we can accept others more. And
remember that oneness, right? Our oneness, our connection with each other, all that there is. I think
what we do to others, we do to ourselves. So let's remember to love ourselves unconditionally. So then we can go out and spread that love and joy and bliss to everyone else during this holiday season and into the new year of 2022. Azure, thank you so much for being on the show with me today. I hope that this conversation, I love you. And I hope that this show was supportive of people that are listening today. I hope that you can adopt some of these Christ consciousness-like qualities into your personal world, into your divine self, and then in turn out to others. And may this holiday season be blissful and peaceful to you and into the new year as well. Happy 2022, happy holidays, gratitude, peace, and blessings. I know I can speak for Azure and I. We love you. We love you. We see you. We want the best for you. So
absolutely.
Happy holidays, everybody. Happy New Year.
Holidays.
Hope you enjoyed the show. Please join the healing service on the 24th and 31st if you feel like it's going to be supportive of you. And please let me know in comments, YouTube and Facebook, how you enjoyed the show or anything else that you'd like to hear in future shows, or any comments for Azure and I during this time. Thank you so much. Gratitude, peace, and blessings.
Thank you for listening to Awaken Your Truth with me, Ritika Rose. I hope that you heard something today that sparked a shift in your perspective to free your mind, heal your life, and embody your power. The world needs love, acceptance, togetherness, and belonging. My hope is to be a contributing force towards the new world we need to create together. If each of us can awaken our truth and live with more empathy and authenticity, that shift will radiate. Spread the word and tune in next time for more conscious dialogues of healing and transformation on Transformation Talk Radio and Awaken Your Truth with Ritika Rose on YouTube and across all podcast stations. For more information about how to work with me, please visit ritikaRose.com.
Views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the host and guests and do not express the views or opinions of any of their employers or affiliates.